Hello, my mother works in an office and this topic is really close to my heart. This isn't just a story for the sake of use, it's a story based on real experiences. I'm doing this so that you can learn about yourselves and perhaps avoid repeating other people's mistakes, because when everything is hanging over you and you remain silent, the consequences can be louder than any words.
Why the hell is Trillium threatening to pull out? Carter's voice cracked through the open floor like a car alarm, shrill and directionless. I didn't flinch, just clicked my pen shut and slid my notebook into the top drawer. The same drawer it had lived in for 6 years, tucked beside a roll of masking tape, a lint roller and a thumb drive with half the company's SOPs no one had ever officially asked for, but constantly relied on. I'd already heard whispers from sales and onboarding. What's happening to the handoffs? Did you catch the client tags? Why isn't finance syncing with CRM anymore? Simple. Because I stopped doing it. Not out of spite, out of principle and exhaustion. But let me back up a second. 6 years at Kessler Holt. I was never the loudest. Never the one wearing heels that clicked like power moves down the tile. I didn't chase LinkedIn likes or fake lunchroom networking. I wore cardigans, brought my own lunch, and got more done by 10 a.m. than Carter managed in a week. My desk, strategically placed between ops and strategy, close enough to hear the panic, far enough to never get directly blamed for it. I became the unofficial glue, the go ask her she knows person. My calendar was always open because somehow I was in all the rooms without ever being invited. Then came Carter, all jawline, no memory. Fresh from Stanford or Wharton, I didn't care enough to check. He walked in with the energy of a man who thought Slack bots could replace 6 years of human duct tape. The kind of guy who thought a color-coded heat map could solve interpersonal chaos. His first week, he called a meeting titled Eliminating Redundancies. That's when I knew. He wasn't going to ask how things worked. He was going to assume they didn't. Before we go any further, if you're listening and you've ever been the one who quietly fixed everything while someone else took credit, hit the like button and subscribe. I know 97% of you won't, but it honestly helps the team, and it lets us keep telling stories like this that don't make it into motivational posters or corporate town halls. Anyway, Carter didn't even learn my name for 2 weeks. I was her. As in, can she loop in the client tags, or did she pull that workflow data? My name is Melissa, by the way, just in case anyone was wondering. By the 3rd week, he'd started rerouting approvals, stuff that used to go through me unofficially because it worked, suddenly had to be formally requested through ticketing channels. Okay, sure. I let it ride. Watched 1, then 2, then 4 workflows start slipping. Meanwhile, Carter strutted around with his dashboard screenshots and a highlighter, explaining friction points to people who'd been here since dial-up. Then came my quarterly check-in. I'd been filling in as senior analyst for 2 years. 2. Handling analytics, pipeline reports, risk modeling, all while technically still a mid-level coordinator. So I finally asked. Formally. I sat in his office, portfolio ready, and said, I'd like to talk about a path to senior. I've been performing those duties for quite a while. He didn't even stop typing. We're going with someone with more vertical range. Vertical. Range. He didn't look up once, just kept clacking away like he was writing the next great American budget model. You're solid where you are, he added. Just stay in your lane. I smiled. I actually smiled, because the decision was made for me right there. That night, I went home, opened my HR file, and printed out my contract. I highlighted every single task listed under job responsibilities. And the next morning, I followed that list like it was scripture. You want to know what happened when I stopped being helpful? Nothing. At first. Then everything. The thing about being told to stay in your lane is, fine, I will. But I'll do it with the exact energy of someone who just stopped caring whether the rest of the freeway crashes and burns. I didn't cry. I didn't vent in the bathroom. I didn't even text my work bestie some spicy reaction gif. I just felt this cold clarity slide over me like a snowstorm inside my ribs. I walked out of Carter's office that day like I had a new religion, and its name was literal compliance. My job description was 2 pages long. I'd never actually read it before. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of boxed wine, a highlighter, and the kind of laser focus I used to reserve for quarterly reconciliation errors. You know what was on that list? Data review, internal scheduling, formatting weekly briefs. You know what wasn't? Forecast models, cross-team onboarding plans, cleaning up after Carter's half-baked presentation decks, or stepping in to explain platform logic when he stumbled in front of Latchman. I'd been doing all of that, quietly, efficiently, like a damn ghost holding up the walls of a crumbling cathedral while the architects posed for photos out front. So I stopped. The next morning, I showed up exactly on time. No early login, no head start. When Carter flagged me down with his usual, "Hey, can you pull the integration metrics from last quarter?" I said, "That's not listed under my contractually assigned duties. You'll want to check with data ops." He laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. I flipped open my notebook, jotted down the timestamp, and kept moving. By noon, he'd asked for 4 other things I used to handle on autopilot. I declined all of them. Politely, calmly, redirected him every time. Not my responsibility. Try compliance. That falls under strategy. Let me forward you the contact. That task was never officially in my scope. Each line delivered with the same measured cadence of someone handing you your own mess in a labeled envelope. The air shifted. I heard it in the sudden silence after he walked away. I felt it in the way the product lead peeked up from her screen and tilted her head. One of the junior analysts mouthed, "What just happened?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the invisible net I'd been spinning around that office for 2 years, catching dropped balls, smoothing miscommunications, rerouting chaos, had vanished, and nobody realized how thin the ice was until I stopped warming it. That week, 2 client emails went unflagged. A meeting request from compliance sat unopened in Carter's inbox. The onboarding tracker slipped out of sync with CRM. I knew exactly how to fix each issue. I didn't lift a finger. I just watched the quiet stumble, like someone removing one brick from a load-bearing wall and saying, "It's fine, we've got more bricks." People noticed. Not all at once, but enough. The receptionist came by and whispered, "Is everything okay?" I smiled. Perfectly fine, just working within my official duties. And you know what? It felt good. Not petty, not vengeful, just clean, like finally dropping a weight you forgot you were even holding. My spine started uncurling, my jaw unclenched. I slept better that week than I had in months, because I'd been doing 2 jobs for the price of one, and now I was doing exactly one, the one I was paid for, the one Carter had deemed solid where you are. Solid enough to let him drown, apparently. Wednesday morning, 9:04 a.m., Carter's cologne hit before his voice did, some overpriced attempt at executive musk that smelled more like airport duty-free. He tapped the edge of my desk like we were still in the good old days when I played fairy godmother to his disorganized chaos. "Hey," he said, tone clipped and sunny like a man who didn't realize he was bleeding out. "Can you chase down the audit deck for Trillium?" I didn't even look up, just flipped my notebook shut and replied, "Not my responsibility. You'll want finance or compliance." He stood there for a beat. "You always handle this stuff." I finally met his eyes. Not anymore. He didn't say anything else, just blinked, once, twice, and walked away with the slack-jawed confusion of a man who just realized the vending machine stopped giving free snacks. By 10:17 a.m., I'd redirected 3 more requests, 1 from sales, 2 from ops. The sales one was trying to schedule a client transfer. Normally, I'd have done the calendar shuffle in under a minute. This time, you'll need to route that through client services. The ops requests were for data formatting and a quick doc for a deck. I gave them the same answer, same even tone. Not in my job description. Try Carter or creative. No eye rolls, no sighs, no passive-aggressive keyboard clacking, just silence. That's what rattled them most. I wasn't angry. I wasn't dramatic. I didn't storm out or send a "per my last email." I simply stopped, like someone had cut the engine mid-flight and was waiting to see if the plane nosedived. By 11:42 a.m., the Trillium team pushed their call to Friday. Their reasoning? Incomplete prep on the audit deck. Translation: no one knew which files to use because I wasn't there to quietly pull them from the black hole of our chaotic filing system and massage the numbers into legible dignity. At 1:30 p.m., I overheard onboarding near tears. 2 kickoff meetings had crumbled. One because the policy doc wasn't in the shared folder. I used to upload it every Tuesday without being asked. and the other because Carter forgot to send the pre-read. Around 3 p.m., I saw Carter pacing by the kitchen, phone glued to his face, trying to spin gold out of a spreadsheet that still had placeholder text. The kind of file that says insert client name here and TBD in every cell. I sipped my coffee and opened Excel for my actual assigned task, reformatting the Q3 calendar blocks. It was the kind of work that didn't get you a thank you, but now it felt like armor. The thing about being the quiet one, the one who just knows where everything is that when you stop whispering the answers, the people who built their house on your silence don't hear the cracks. They feel the floor give way, and they don't know where to stand. By the time I logged off that night, 4 tasks I used to autocomplete were now sitting in limbo. Nobody had noticed the daily Slack summary I used to post that tied 3 teams together. No one had flagged the outdated client codes in the master sheet. I used to fix that every Wednesday. This Wednesday, I closed my laptop and let entropy have its moment. Still no drama, no speeches, just absence. Funny thing is, absence echoes louder than presence when you've been invisible glue for too long, and by the end of the day, they were already slipping. By Thursday, Carter was unraveling like a $12 tie from Marshall's. His voice ricocheted off the walls near the IT pod, sharp, defensive, increasingly fast. Why is Latchman escalating again? Where are we with the Trillium deck? Why are there 6 unresolved tickets from marketing? I didn't even look up. Just clicked through a spreadsheet no one had asked me to build but had been using for 3 quarters straight. It had color-coded flags, time-stamped updates, client quirks noted in the margins. I stopped maintaining it Monday. The ops dashboards looked fine, which was the problem. Green bars across every lane. On paper, everything was running. Ticket volume steady, response time acceptable, project milestones on track. But Carter didn't understand that throughput isn't the same as cohesion. He didn't realize the data didn't show where things connected, only that they existed. He thought operations was about visible outputs. I knew better. I knew the workflow beneath the workflow. The real work was in the silences, those undocumented Slack threads I jumped into before questions became blockers. The 6-year-old legacy access path for client data that only I knew how to reroute when Salesforce glitched. The email threads where I CC'd the one person who always got left off by accident. The quiet tap on the shoulder I used to give someone before they walked into a meeting without the right deck. That's what Carter didn't see, because none of it showed up on the dashboard. And now, nobody was juggling, because I dropped every ball he never knew I was holding. By mid-morning, people started circling. Not in an aggressive way, more like birds before a storm. One of the new analysts asked, "Hey, do you know who owns the SharePoint map for Trillium's legal stack?" I smiled. That was something I maintained voluntarily. Try legal or risk now. He blinked like I just told him Santa was fake. At 12:23 p.m., Trillium escalated again. This time, publicly. An exec on their side forwarded a thread to Carter and CC'd 3 directors. 3rd delay this week. We're losing confidence in the transition support. Translation. You're about to lose the client. Carter spun around his office like he was going to physically grab the solution out of thin air. I saw him pull up the dashboards, squinting like more staring would make the problem surface. But the dashboards were clean, slick, meaningless. He didn't know the pipes were rotting under the paint. Meanwhile, I filed 2 scheduled reports, prepped a calendar draft for next week, and quietly updated my own document of tasks I used to do but no longer fall within my scope. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for clarity, for the day they'd ask, "Why didn't anyone warn us?" And I'd have a full PDF titled, "You were warned, you just didn't listen." At 3:45 p.m., he asked around about that integration checklist we always use for onboarding. Nobody knew where it was. That's because it lived in my head. Not out of ego, just because no one ever thought to ask me to write it down. Now they'd have to build it from scratch. Again. I closed my tabs slowly, savoring the way silence settled around my desk. The kind of silence you only get when the chaos is external and you're no longer a part of it. My inbox was quiet. My heart rate was even. The building was shaking and I was still sipping tea because I didn't remove a system. I removed myself from it, and suddenly they realized the system was never the thing that held it together. It was me. Friday was forecasted to be smooth. That's the lie we tell ourselves when we've built every structure on hope and muscle memory. The Latchman Equity Quarterly call had been on the calendar for 6 weeks. Carter walked in that morning wearing his big boy blazer, probably thinking he was going to dazzle them with keywords and confidence. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask if he needed help. I didn't nudge the outline across the table like I'd done every quarter before. Because no one asked, so no one got it. I used to spend a quiet 2 hours every briefing day formatting his deck like a damn runway, aligning his charts, smoothing his bullet points, cross-referencing every forecast with actuals. I'd prepare a 1-page cheat sheet so he didn't get blindsided during Q&A. I'd even time his talking points against the slides so he wouldn't ramble. This time, nothing. I sat at my desk typing up a draft for something completely unrelated, part of my official duties, and listened through the glass as the train started coming off the rails. Carter was pacing before the call even started. He kept refreshing the file directory, scanning for something that wasn't coming. I knew that look. The panic that sets in when you realize you forgot to tie your shoelaces and someone just yelled, "Sprint." He asked a junior coordinator where the reconciled forecast file was. She blinked and said, "Wasn't that yours?" I almost laughed. It wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. Not anymore. At 1:04 p.m., the Zoom chime echoed from the boardroom. Latchman Equity was on. I could hear their chief investment officer's voice through the glass. Crisp. Measured. "We're excited to hear your positioning against the Q2 revisions." Carter opened his mouth and immediately fumbled the delta. He swapped margin percentages with growth figures. His hand visibly shook on slide 3. He forgot a major revenue stream entirely. I didn't flinch. I just sipped my coffee. Then came the pause. Latchman's team stopped him mid-sentence and said, "We're going to reschedule. This doesn't appear fully prepped." Brutal, precise, corporate for, "You look like amateurs." They hung up. That would have been enough, honestly, but fate wanted extra salt. 10 minutes later, one of our execs pinged Carter mid-thread. "Who was supposed to prep you?" No one replied. I didn't gloat. Didn't so much as smirk. I just stared at my untouched phone, which, 4 months ago, would have blown up with Carter's frantic pings. "Can you just jump in for 5? Need a quick fix. You around?" Silence. I wasn't on the call. I wasn't on the hook. I wasn't on the rescue list. Because Carter had made it crystal clear, I was solid where I was. And I was. I was so solid, in fact, that everything above me had started to collapse. By 3 p.m., Carter was pale and sweating, barking orders to recreate a week's worth of prep in under 2 hours. People were digging through email threads, trying to backfill what used to be instinctual. He pulled up a deck from last quarter and started swapping dates, hoping no one would notice. Half the slides had old data. One even had my initials in the footer. He deleted them quickly. The director of strategy walked by, glanced at the glass room, and didn't say a word. But she saw it. Everyone saw it. Carter wasn't ready, because Carter had never been ready. He was just riding on the quiet work I stopped doing. That's the thing about being the backstop. When you stop catching, people realize how far and fast the ball actually drops. And Wall Street? They don't flinch twice. By Sunday evening, the digital equivalent of sirens was blaring. Our internal crisis board, which usually sat dormant like some forgotten weather channel, suddenly flashed red across half the screen. 19 active escalations, 6 client complaints, 3 accounts flagged as high churn risk. The Slack channels were graveyards of confusion. Compliance had already declared 3 workflows non-operational, their version of sending up a flare and walking away slowly. At 2:12 a.m., Carter did what men like Carter always do when the room catches fire. He sent an all-hands email. Subject line, "Immediate ops review, root cause required." Body, a 5-paragraph scramble of urgent, align, temporary setbacks, and the kicker, "Let's all pitch in." I didn't pitch in. I didn't reply. I wasn't part of all anymore. Instead, I brewed chamomile, shut my laptop, and went to bed. For the first time in a long while, I felt no guilt, just gravity leaving my shoulders. Because here's the thing. When the house you quietly held together starts to fall and no one ever asked how the beams were braced, you don't run in to stop the collapse. You let them hear the creaking. By Monday morning, the building had a different energy. Not panic, yet, but a stillness. The kind that settles in when people sense the grown-ups left the room and no one's steering anymore. At 9:03 a.m., the director of strategy, Rhonda, sharp suit, sharper instincts, appeared at my desk. She didn't smile, didn't posture, just looked at me like someone who just realized they'd been reading the wrong map. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her tone wasn't casual. It was careful. I nodded and followed her to a quiet corner office usually reserved for boardroom overflow. She closed the door. "I want to understand," she said, folding her hands, "about the workflows, the ones that fell apart." I pulled out a single sheet I'd prepared over the weekend. One page, clear as glass. At the top, it read, "Current contractual duties M. Reyes." Below it, 10 bullet points. My real job. The one outlined in HR records. The one I hadn't deviated from since Carter told me to stay in my lane. "These," I said, sliding it across the table, "are the tasks I'm required to perform. Everything else, the onboarding prep, the integrations, the handoffs, the client briefing decks, those were never part of my formal role. I did them voluntarily. As of last Monday, I stopped." She stared at the paper longer than most people would, then looked up. "Why?" "Because I asked for acknowledgement," I said simply. "Not a parade, just the title I've been functioning under for 2 years. I was told no, so I adjusted accordingly." She tapped the page once. "And this is accurate?" "Yes." Another beat of silence. Then she nodded, slowly, like someone reviewing the final page of a report they didn't want to understand, but now had to. "You kept the place from burning down," she said quietly. "No," I corrected her. "I kept it from sputtering. The fire was already there. I just didn't let it spread." She didn't argue. She didn't have to, because in that moment, she saw it. Not just what I had done, but what I'd stopped doing. The quiet labor, the invisible threads, the voluntary muscles behind Carter's entire illusion of control. And with one sheet of paper, the conversation shifted, not just between us, but across the whole organization. Recognition didn't roar in. It arrived in a whisper that would get louder by the hour. By 2:40 that afternoon, the HR ping came through, just a routine system update. "Please review changes to your employment profile." The kind of line that usually means someone spelled your name wrong on the company directory, but I opened it anyway. Buried 2 screens deep under the pay section was a quiet bump. No fanfare, no "congratulations" banner, just a line item adjustment. Pay band expanded. Still no title change, no department shift. Just more money in exchange for the same job I'd been doing while they looked the other way. I closed the tab. No reaction. Just breathed once. Slow. 2 hours later, Carter vanished from the Slack sidebar. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then, the announcement came in like a whisper dropped on a boardroom table. He'd been moved to a project-focused strategic role effective immediately. No formal statement, no goodbye email, no team huddle. Not fired, not demoted, just removed. That was enough. Nobody clapped, nobody protested. Most just adjusted, like a ship shifting weight after tossing dead cargo overboard. A few people pinged me with emojis, a coffee mug, a quiet. I ignored them. This wasn't about celebration. It was about recalibration. I went back to my desk, same chair, same creaky armrest, and opened a blank document. It was time to start writing things down, system maps, communication handoffs, the naming conventions I'd standardized without anyone ever noticing, the backup logic I used when Salesforce failed to sync. I built flowcharts, annotated decision trees, color-coded escalation ladders, not for glory, for protection. Because when the building forgets who built it, you don't argue anymore. You document. From then on, I did the extras, but only the ones I chose. I no longer answered every fire alarm just because I could smell smoke. I picked the ones worth saving. I moved like a ghost with a clipboard, doing just enough to keep things aligned, but never again letting them mistake my silence for servitude. They'd asked, without asking, who was truly irreplaceable. They got their answer, and I didn't need a new title to prove it. I had timestamps. I had logs. I had a whole stack of quiet receipts in my drawer, and the knowledge that if they ever decided to forget again, I wouldn't say a word. I'd just stop writing, and they'd feel it, all over again. It was a Wednesday morning when the new workflow diagrams hit the intranet. Polished, clean, actually usable, for once. A neat little collection of flowcharts titled Ops Foundation V1, complete with logic paths and contingency trees that didn't just explain how things should work, but how they actually did, in real time, under pressure. I stared at the PDF for a minute before the recognition set in. My spacing, my color logic, even the way I formatted optional steps with dotted arrows, something I'd done for years in my own notes because it helped me think sideways when things broke. No signature, no credit, but it was mine. And everyone who needed to know already knew. That afternoon, the new ops lead, someone smart enough to observe before talking, walked through the diagrams with a team in the glass conference room. I didn't go. I didn't need to. They had the map. Whether or not they said my name aloud didn't matter anymore. About halfway through the session, one of the senior VPs paused at the whiteboard. He tapped the corner of the diagram and tilted his head. "You did this, right?" he asked, his voice quiet but direct, like a man finally seeing the ghost behind the curtain. I didn't nod, didn't speak. I just looked at the system, and he looked at me. Then he turned to the new lead and said, "We won't make that mistake again." It wasn't performative, it wasn't loud, just a small correction rippling through the organization like a soft undercurrent, pulling things back into balance. Carter's name wasn't mentioned once. Not in the handouts, not in the folders, not in the room. It was like he'd been surgically extracted from the narrative. The thing about legacy is, it doesn't need applause, it just needs to function. People came up to me in small ways after that. A nod at the printer. A quiet, "Thanks for that diagram." Someone left a fresh pack of my favorite pens on my desk without a note. I kept doing my job. Not more, not less. But now when I walked past a screen and saw my own logic flowing through their decks, I didn't feel invisible. I felt permanent. Like the page didn't need my name because my presence was baked into every arrow and conditional branch. Every, if no, reroute to compliance. Every workaround labeled not by title, but by intuition. The diagrams didn't need a signature, because they were already written in my language, and for the first time, they were finally speaking it back. I still sit near the printer, same desk, same potted plant that never quite dies, same coffee mug with the faded world's okayest analyst lettering. People walk by like they always have, rushing to make meetings they'll forget in an hour, balancing bad coffee and half-charged laptops. But the air's different now. When they stop by, it's not with questions like, "Where's the integration doc?" or "Do you have that file?" It's, "What do you think of this rollout?" or "Does this look like it'll hold?" They stopped treating me like a filing cabinet and started treating me like a compass. I still don't speak much in meetings, never liked the sound of corporate theater. But once a year, I get invited to the leadership offsite, not to lead, not to present, just to listen, observe, suggest. The first time they asked, I assumed it was a mistake. Now it's tradition. Someone always makes sure there's a chair for me near the end of the table. I bring my notebook. I don't always open it, but they notice when I do. And more importantly, they notice when I don't. The notebook's the same one I've always used. Hardcover, worn at the spine. Tabs color-coded in a system no one else understands, but everyone respects. It's never flashy. It's just there, constant, reliable, like me. I still write with the same pen, still use the same 3-column layout: observation, implication, solution. There are days I say nothing and still leave the room louder than half the team combined. And when I close the notebook, when that soft thunk lands in the quiet of a post-meeting lull, people glance up now. Subtle, reflexive. They've learned the rhythm. When I open it, something's about to be fixed. When I close it without writing, something's already broken. They remember now. They remember what it felt like when the lights were on, the dashboards were green, and everything still fell apart. They remember the silence, the dangerous kind that came when I stopped doing the things no one tracked. No one thanked, but everyone depended on. So now they don't ask me to do everything. They ask me what's missing, and I answer when I feel like it. Because power isn't always about having the mic. Sometimes it's about knowing when to put the cap back on your pen and let the silence explain everything they need to know. That notebook, it never leaves my side, and when it closes, they listen. Because now they know what happens when it stays closed too long.